Hey everyone, I'm sorry to say, but I quit. I could not look for that quality 4 Roiling Consequence any longer, and I went ahead and upgraded my quality 3. Now I'm just one copy away from upgrading it to a rank 6, so maybe eventually I will find that 4-star quality one, but for now we're going to go ahead and test my quality 3 level 5 Roiling Consequence and compare it to some of the other gems that I normally use in my setup. Let's go. So for starters, the gem I'd be swapping out for Roiling is Seeping Bile. So this is a quality 4 out of 5 and rank 5, but with upgrade progress on it. So with this, attacks have 4% chance to poison enemies, inflicting 35% base damage plus 263 every second for 6 seconds and decreasing movement speed by 12%. The poison spreads to nearby enemies if the victim dies and cannot affect the same target more often than once every 20 seconds. So Seeping Bile for a 5-star gem, the trigger percentage on that is quite low. It's only 4%. However, this is obviously going to give me slightly more resonance, so you can see I'm on 3.6k resonance with this gem equipped, whereas Roiling, because it hasn't got that progressive upgrade and it is a lower quality, it doesn't have quite so much resonance. So we're going to test this build out with Seeping Bile first to see how much damage we can get in 10 seconds. So let's see what we get from this, and this build I'm going to use the exact same one with Roiling. So unfortunately I was slow at clicking and I got 11 seconds there, but on average 10 seconds is 17.5 million, because you can see there my damage per second is 1.75 million. So yeah, 17 million damage in a 10-second burst. Now we're going to go ahead and swap this out for Roiling. I do also have 2 pieces of the Eternal gear equipped for Meteor, which is why I've got Meteor in this build now. Normally I actually use the Disintegrate Shoulder that gives you that Arcane Deputy. However, I swapped it out for this one instead. So with Roiling Consequence, let's have a look at this. This gives 100 combat rating. Dealing damage sends you into a Roiling Rage for 6 seconds, during which your critical hit chance is increased by 24%, and critical hits cause fiery explosions that burn nearby enemies for 36% base damage over 3 seconds. Explosions cannot occur more than once every 1 second. Roiling Rage cannot trigger more often than every 20 seconds. Your critical hit chance against burning enemies is increased by 6%. So critical hit chance is increased by 6% on burning enemies. So that was part of the reason I actually swapped Meteor into this build, so that I have that burning already on enemies instead of the Arcane Deputy, which obviously isn't a burning effect from that. So obviously this is slightly lower resonance, slightly lower combat rating. You can see there my resonance is now below 3.6k. So let's now test this out with the Roiling and see if we get increased damage on the target dummy before we go and try it in a dungeon. So we have a huge increase here of 8 million more damage in a 10-second burst and 2.56 million damage per second. So you can see that Roiling Consequence is a really strong gem, and you can understand now why I was looking for that 4 out of 5 quality at minimum. Hopefully we'll have better luck with that another time. For this build and for the dungeon run, I'm also using the protector buff for the increased size, as this helps with movement speed. Normally, if I was using attacker, this would give even more damage to Roiling as well, so I might test that later in the video. For now, let's head to the dungeon. So for this run, we've got Roiling Consequence on the left and Seeping Bile on the right. And once again, a huge thank you to my friend GameZone for compiling the side-by-side for me. I actually find it really useful to see side by side like this rather than doing one run and then the other, and because you can see exactly the timestamp on each video and see which build is stronger. So this build is the same for each run, however we're using the Roiling Consequence on the left and Seeping Bile in the right. I also ensured to change my combat stance at the same point in each run to give it a truly fair test. So one thing to mention is that the Roiling Consequence build still has that poison effect from Viper's Bite as well. So Viper's Bite is a really strong gem, and I actually have this equipped in both builds. So the Seeping Bile build has poison from Seeping Bile and Viper's Bite, and the Roiling Consequence build has the poison effect from Viper's Bite. Now, it may only be a 2-star gem, but Viper's Bite is really strong, and I do recommend checking it out if you haven't already used it in any of your builds. It works really nicely in PvP and PvE, and I use it in both. It's just a really solid gem. So when I watched these videos back, I was actually quite surprised at the speed that I managed to do these dungeons in, because this is not my normal dungeon build. This is something that I just kind of threw together after finding the Eternal gear for Meteor. So I basically incorporated Meteor into this build instead of the Disintegrate with the Arcane Deputy shoulder. And I find this works really nicely because I've got that increased damage on Meteor. It's actually a solid and fast build to use. So if you get those pieces, it's definitely worth using. I've also been finding some more Eternal pieces recently, and I'm going to make some videos on them when I have enough to actually test it out at the test dummy and in dungeons as well. So at this point, we're near the 2-minute mark, and we're going to see which one is going to defeat the boss first. Obviously, Roiling Consequence is slightly ahead at the moment, but can I take the boss down quick enough? Let's just see. Yep, so Roiling Consequence is definitely the faster gem here, and that run is over already, whereas Seeping Bile is still going. We're at the 2-minute mark with Seeping Bile now, so 1 minute 54 for Roiling Consequence and 2 minute 4 second for Seeping Bile. So we're now going to take a detailed look into the build that I was using for the Roiling Consequence run. Starting off with Paragon, obviously this information will be obsolete with the update, but we're using the Weaver tree. I would suggest using that when the update to Paragon comes in place. For Warband buff, we were actually not using Attacker, we were using Protector, so this increases your life and size, which is why I was using that, because it makes speedruns a lot faster having that increased size. Your character will move at a much higher speed. So now taking a look at set items, we're using 4 pieces of Vitus. So this increases the duration of all beneficial effects on your party members by 30% and increases the target's attack speed by 30% for 3 seconds each time you use a skill to grant a beneficial effect to yourself or a party member. So I really like Vitus for the increased attack speed. That works really nicely if you don't have many other buffs on your attack speed. We're also using 4 pieces of Grace. All continual damage, channel damage and persistent ground damage is increased by 15%, and each time you damage an individual enemy 5 times, you will do 16,008 additional damage to that enemy. I'd also recommend using something like Shalbas or Angmets in exchange for this, just because I think that would be more solid with this build, but I didn't have the right pieces to swap out for that in this run, unfortunately. So now looking at gear, starting with the helm, we're using Silver Lining. So Black Hole now devours the power of enemies caught within it, increasing the damage you deal by 28.5% for 6 seconds. We've got Sprite Spark on the chest. Lightning Nova now transfigures you into a ball of pure lightning, allowing you to move at high speed and continually deal damage to any nearby enemies. Lightning Nova damage is increased by 18%. On the shoulder, we've got Shoulders of the Cataclysm. Simple, but meteor damage is increased by 19%. With Thunderous Applause, so Meteor now calls down a meteor shower that follows you, damaging and burning enemies, but it no longer stuns. Meteor damage is increased 18% and an additional 10% there from the Awakened slot. A solid favourite on the main hand is Rift Carver, so Arcane Torrent now creates a chaotic orb that moves with you and fires arcane missiles at random nearby enemies. Damage is increased 18% and damage is increased 10% from the Awakened slot there as well. On the offhand, we've got Chaos Rupture. So Black Hole now instead conjures an unstable star that explodes when it expires, damaging nearby enemies. Black Hole damage is increased 18% and Black Hole cooldown is decreased 10% from the Awakened slot. Volatile Arbiter on the alternate main hand. Magic Missile explodes every 3 hits, dealing 18,036 damage to surrounding enemies, and damage is increased 90%. Now for the run, unfortunately, I had Entropic Edge equipped. So actually this build is probably more solid now than when I tested it and when I ran it in the dungeon, but there we go, that is what I would use. We also have Blaster Cast on the alternate offhand, so Magic Missile fires 2 additional missiles, each dealing 4,336 damage, and damage is increased by 90%. Now it does say here that I had a cursed property active, however I didn't actually have one active for the run. This is just where I swapped out a piece of gear for something with slightly higher combat rating and stats. So you can just ignore that. I didn't have any cursed properties active and instead went with the ancestral boost of damage. Now moving on to legendary gems, we've got Blood-Soaked Jade, Starfire Shard, Roiling Consequence, Pain Clasp, Viper's Bite, Mother's Lament, Gloom Cask, and Bottled Hope there as well. So that is pretty much my gem setup as I'm reusing it in all of my builds. I also just want to give a shout out to my friend who gifted me this cosmetic for my birthday. This is the Children of Anarius cosmetic and I'm obsessed. It actually looks amazing. I don't really buy cosmetics, so it's actually really nice to have been gifted that. So that is pretty much it from me today. I hope you found this video helpful as always, and thank you for watching. Have a great day.